The palace was silent, except for the sound of the humans' footsteps. David walked slowly through the long halls made of silver stone, his heart beating fast. He had been kept here for many days, treated with respect, but also with hidden fear. Servants bowed when he passed, but no one spoke to him directly. Only one person came to see him often, and she was the one who called herself the Queen. She was tall, graceful, with glowing eyes and golden hair that shimmered like firelight. She told him stories of her people, of wars fought across the stars, and of the throne she carried. To David, she seemed lonely, even though the palace was full of guards and attendants. When she looked at him, he felt she was not looking as a ruler, but as a woman searching for something she did not have. One night, the queen came to him in a quiet garden, where strange flowers glowed in the dark. The air smelled sweet, and the moon above the alien sky burned brighter than Earth's sun. She stood before him, her cloak falling around her shoulders, and for the first time David noticed her trembling. She sat beside him, her eyes softer than he had ever seen. "Human," she whispered, "do you know why you are here?" David shook his head, unsure if he should answer. She reached out and touched his hand gently, like she feared he would pull away. Her fingers were warm, almost human, and her voice was heavy with a secret she had carried too long. "I am not the true queen," she said, her words sharp like breaking glass. David's breath caught in his throat. He turned to her, confused, thinking he had misheard. She smiled sadly, her lips trembling. "I am only her clone, a copy, a shadow made in her image. They created me to protect her life, to stand in her place if danger came. To the galaxy, I am the queen, but to her, I am nothing." Her voice broke when she said the last word, and for a moment David saw pain deeper than any throne could hide. David stared at her, his mind struggling to accept the truth. All this time, he thought he was in the presence of the great alien ruler, the woman who commanded armies. Instead, he was with a woman made to be used and forgotten. "Then why tell me this?" he asked softly. She leaned closer, her eyes shining like liquid gold. "Because I cannot carry this lie alone anymore, and because you are the only one who sees me as more than a mask. You look at me like I am real, like I am alive." Her words struck him harder than a blade. He realized that yes, he had looked at her differently. Not as a queen on a throne, but as someone fragile, someone lonely. And now she was telling him the truth no one else dared to know. She took his hand again, stronger this time. "I want something the real queen will never allow me to have. A child. Not a child of the throne, but a child of blood and heart. Your child." David's heart raced. He pulled his hand back, shocked by her request. "Why me?" he asked. Her smile turned faint, but her eyes burned with fierce light. "Because human children are strong in ways we cannot understand. Your blood carries resistance to sickness, to fear, to death itself. I was created without purpose, but if I have your child, then I will have meaning. I will not just be her copy. I will be a mother. And no one can take that away." Her voice trembled, but her hands were steady as she reached for him. The garden lights flickered, the flowers swayed, and David felt his world turning upside down. He had never thought of himself as special, yet here was a woman, no, a clone, asking him to give her something even kings could not grant. His throat went dry, his thoughts tangled between fear and sympathy. He opened his mouth to speak, but the ground beneath them suddenly shook. The flowers bent, the walls of the palace trembled, and a deep sound echoed through the air, like thunder rolling across the stars. The clone's face turned pale. Her eyes widened with fear. She stood quickly, pulling David to his feet. "She's here," she whispered. David's heart froze. "Who?" he asked, though the answer was already written in the panic on her face. "The real queen," she said, her voice sharp with dread. "She has returned." At that moment, the sky above the palace cracked open with the roar of engines. Massive shadows covered the garden as alien warships descended, their lights blinding, their thunder shaking the ground. Soldiers ran through the halls, their voices carrying words of loyalty and fear. The clone grabbed David's hand tightly, her grip stronger than iron. "You must stay with me. Do not let her see you with me." But it was too late. From the tallest tower, a figure emerged. She was taller than the clone, her presence heavy like a storm. Her armor gleamed, her crown shone like fire, and her voice carried across the palace like 1,000 drums. "Who dares touch what belongs to me?" David felt his chest tighten. He looked at the clone beside him, whose face was full of terror but also defiance. She had confessed her secret, shown her weakness, and asked for his child. And now, the real queen had returned, her shadow falling over them both. The clone whispered one last thing, her lips trembling as soldiers bowed to the figure above. "She will demand you, David. She will demand your child. But remember, I was the one who told you the truth." David's heart pounded so hard he thought it would break through his chest. He had no weapon, no power, no throne. Only the weight of two women, one a queen, one a clone, both seeing him as more than just a man. The night air felt cold as stone, and in that silence, David realized he was no longer free. He was trapped in a war not of armies, but of hearts, lies, and bloodlines. The ground shook under David's feet as soldiers filled the garden, kneeling before the tall figure who stepped down from the palace tower. She was the real queen, and her presence made the air heavy. Her eyes glowed like burning metal, her crown flashed with cruel beauty, and her steps echoed with power. Every alien guard bent their heads so low it almost touched the floor, but not a single one looked at the clone. It was as if the woman standing by David's side had turned invisible the moment the real queen appeared. David froze in place, his hand still trapped in the clone's grip. He could feel her trembling, but her grip did not loosen. The queen's gaze swept across the garden like a storm wind, and when her eyes landed on David, he felt a chill crawl down his spine. She was not looking at him like a stranger. She was looking at him as if he already belonged to her. "Rise." The queen commanded, her voice deep and sharp like thunder. The soldiers obeyed at once, moving back into perfect lines. Her gaze shifted to the clone, and her lips curled into a smile that carried no kindness. "So, my shadow thought she could taste what belongs to me." The clone stepped in front of David, shielding him from that burning gaze. "I am not just a shadow," she said, her voice unsteady but brave. "I am alive, and I choose him." The soldiers gasped at her words, their eyes flicking between the two women. To speak so boldly against the queen was unthinkable, yet the clone's words did not falter. The queen laughed, a cold, echoing sound that made David's heart pound. "Choose him," she repeated mockingly. "You are a broken echo of me. You feel only what I allow. And now you dare claim choice?" She stepped closer, her armor glinting, her crown blazing in the garden's glow. "You may wear my face, but you are not me. You will never be me." David wanted to step forward, to speak, but fear rooted him to the ground. He could see the pain on the clone's face, but also the fire in her eyes. She was not backing down. She clenched her fists, her voice trembling with anger. "I am more than you think. I feel love, I feel pain, I feel hope. That makes me real. That makes me more than just your mask." The queen's smile vanished. In one swift motion, she raised her hand, and the soldiers aimed their weapons at David. "If love makes you real, then let us test it," she said coldly. "Step aside, or watch him be taken from you. He is mine. His child will be mine. You are nothing." David's breath caught. The truth slammed into him. This was not just about him, not just about the clone. The queen wanted his bloodline, his child, and she would take it no matter what. The clone's body blocked him, but David could see her shaking, could feel her fear, yet she did not move away. "Over my body?" the clone said in a low voice. Her words made the queen's face twist in fury. The queen turned her gaze to David, and for the first time, she spoke to him directly. "Human," she said, her voice dripping with command. "You stand before your rightful ruler. You will father my child, and through it, your name will live forever. Bow to me, and I will give you power beyond your small imagination. Resist, and I will crush you and your little shadow together." David swallowed hard, his mind racing. The clone's hand gripped his tightly, her body trembling. She whispered, her voice desperate but filled with emotion. "Don't listen. She sees you as a tool. I see you as a man." Her eyes burned with tears, but her face stayed firm. The queen raised her hand higher, and the soldiers stepped closer. The glow of their weapons lit the night, ready to strike. David felt his chest tighten, his heart raced, his breath came short. The weight of two destinies pressed down on him. One demanded by a queen, the other begged by a woman who was never meant to exist. In that moment, he saw the difference between them. The queen's eyes held hunger, cold and empty. The clone's eyes held fear, but also truth. She was not lying when she told him she wanted his child not for power, but for meaning. The queen stepped closer until she stood only a few feet away, her shadow falling over both of them. "Decide," she commanded. "Stand with your queen or die with a copy." Before David could speak, the clone suddenly pulled him back, her movements quick and desperate. With strength he did not expect, she pushed past the soldiers, dragging him toward a narrow passage hidden behind the glowing garden walls. The guards fired, but the clone raised her arm, activating a hidden shield that sparked with light as the blast struck it. "Run!" she cried, her voice fierce with urgency. David stumbled, almost falling, but the clone pulled him forward with unyielding strength. Behind them, the queen's roar filled the air, shaking the palace. "Find them! Bring them to me! The human is mine!" The halls blurred as they ran, the sounds of boots and shouts chasing after them. David's mind spun. His chest burned, but he kept running. The clone never let go of his hand, her eyes locked forward, her breath sharp. "We have to escape before she takes you," she said between gasps. "If she gets you, everything will be lost. She will make you hers, and I will vanish into nothing." David looked at her as they ran, at the fire in her face, the determination burning in her eyes. For the first time, he realized how much she had risked. She could have stayed silent, could have lived as the queen's shadow forever. Instead, she chose to tell him the truth. And now she was willing to fight the most powerful woman in the galaxy to keep him safe. The thunder of the queen's voice echoed through the halls again, closer this time. "You cannot hide from me, human. You are mine." David's lungs ached, his legs screamed, but still he ran, pulled forward by the clone's desperate strength. Every corner they turned, every shadow they passed, felt like a trap. And deep inside, he knew one thing with terrifying certainty. This was only the beginning of a war far greater than anything he had ever imagined. The tunnel walls were damp and dark, lit only by the faint glow of the clone's wrist device. David's breaths came heavy, echoing through the narrow stone passage. He tried to keep up with her pace, but his body ached from running. The clone's grip on his hand was strong, almost desperate, as if letting go meant losing everything. Behind them, the sounds of boots and metal echoed louder and louder. The queen's guards were hunting them, their shouts mixing with the hum of their weapons. The clone stopped suddenly at a split in the tunnels. She pressed her back against the wall, pulling David close so the light from her wrist would not reveal their position. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but her eyes burned with fire. "She will not stop," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The queen will chase us to the ends of the galaxy. She wants you for herself, but I will not let her take you." David looked at her, still trying to understand the weight of everything. "Why me? Why risk your life for me? She could destroy you for this." His voice was hoarse, but his question carried all the confusion tearing through him. The clone turned to him, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Because I am not her," she said firmly. "I am not a throne, not a crown, not a weapon. I am a woman who feels, and I chose you." Her voice cracked, but her gaze never wavered. "If I let her take you, then I am nothing more than what she calls me, a shadow." Her words struck David's heart. He had never seen someone fight so hard, not for power or glory, but for the right to exist, for the right to be real. He could see the pain behind her courage, the years of living in another's shadow, the hunger to prove she was alive in her own way. The sound of soldiers grew louder. The clone pulled him through the left tunnel, moving quickly but with purpose. As they ran, David noticed how carefully she led him, making sure he never stumbled, making sure he stayed close. Even in danger, she protected him. Suddenly, light burst ahead of them. They reached the end of the tunnel, where the stone walls opened into a massive chamber. Old ruins stretched before them, broken columns and shattered statues of alien kings long dead. Dust filled the air, and strange blue fire flickered in ancient bowls that still burned despite the centuries. The clone stopped in the center, her eyes darting around. "This place is sacred," she whispered. "Even the queen fears to come here, but she will come because she fears losing you." David's chest tightened. He looked at the broken faces of the statues, the echoes of power that once ruled here. "She won't stop," he said, his voice low. "She won't allow this." The clone turned to him sharply. "Then I will fight her. I will not let her take you like some prize." Her fists clenched, her whole body trembling with both fear and determination. "I may be her copy, but I am not her slave. My love is mine. My choice is mine, and I choose you." Before David could answer, the air shifted. A cold wind swept through the ruins, carrying the sound of heavy footsteps. From the shadows, the queen emerged, her crown glinting in the pale blue fire. Her soldiers lined the walls, their weapons pointed at David and the clone. The queen's eyes glowed with fury and pride as she looked at them. "You dare run from me?" Her voice thundered. "You dare steal what is mine?" The clone stepped in front of David once again, her arms outstretched like a shield. "He is not yours," she shouted back, her voice echoing across the chamber. "He is not a tool for your throne. He is a man, and he will not belong to you." The queen's face twisted with rage. She raised her hand, and the soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons. "You think you can protect him? You, who were made from my flesh, shaped from my will? You are nothing but a shadow pretending to be real, and now you speak of love?" "Yes," the clone cried, her voice breaking but fierce. "Love makes me real. You can call me a shadow, you can call me nothing, but I feel what you cannot. You see him as a vessel. I see him as a man. That is the difference between us." David's heart pounded as he watched the two women, identical in face but different in soul, stand across from each other. One demanded, the other begged. One claimed power, the other claimed love. And he, caught between them, felt the weight of their war pulling him apart. The queen lowered her voice, sharp as a blade. "Then you will die for this illusion, and he will still be mine." She raised her hand to strike, energy crackling in her palm. Before the blow could fall, the clone pulled David down behind a broken column. The queen's blast struck the stone, shattering it into dust and flame. David coughed, his body shaking, but the clone stood tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You will have to destroy me first," she shouted, standing in the open again. "And if you do, then the galaxy will see what you really are, a queen who kills her own blood just to satisfy her pride." The queen hesitated, her hand trembling with fury. For the first time, David saw something crack in her expression. Anger, yes, but also doubt. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking between their queen and her clone. The silence stretched heavy, broken only by the echo of flames. The queen's voice finally came, colder than ice. "So be it. You wish to stand against me? Then I will not only take the human, I will erase you from every record, every memory. You will never have existed." The clone's chest rose and fell, but her voice stayed strong. "Even if you erase me, even if I die here, I will have been real, because he knows the truth, and because I chose." David's throat tightened. In that moment, he realized the clone was not just fighting for him. She was fighting for her soul, for the right to live as more than a copy. And as the queen's fury grew, David knew the battle between love and power had only just begun. The night was heavy with silence as David and the clone slipped out of the palace ruins. They had escaped the queen's soldiers for now, but danger was close behind them. The clone led him through dark paths and broken streets that stretched beyond the royal walls. The city outside was nothing like the glowing gardens or shining halls of the palace. Here, buildings lay in ruins, broken by years of war and neglect. Fires burned in the distance, and the air smelled of smoke and metal. David followed closely, his legs aching, his mind racing. "Where are we going?" he whispered. The clone glanced back at him, her golden eyes sharp even in the dark. "Far from here. The queen has power everywhere, but there are places she does not control. Old places, forgotten places. We must reach them before her soldiers catch us." They moved through narrow alleys where shadows stretched like claws. Strange figures watched them from broken windows, poor aliens, thin and hollow-eyed, who bowed quickly when they saw the clone's face. They thought she was the queen. They always did. But David noticed something. These people looked at her with both fear and hope, as if unsure whether she came to rule them or save them. When they finally stopped to rest, they crouched inside the remains of a burned-out house. Dust and ash covered the floor, and the wind howled through the empty walls. David leaned against the stone, catching his breath. The clone sat opposite him, her face half hidden in shadow. She looked tired, but her voice was steady. "You see this city?" she asked, motioning to the broken walls around them. "The queen calls it unworthy. She takes from it, but never gives. These people live in hunger and fear while she sits on her throne. I am her face, but I am not her heart. And when they look at me, I see the truth. They wish their queen was someone else. David studied her, feeling the weight of her words. She was right. Even in fear, the eyes of the poor carried a small spark when they looked at her. Perhaps they saw something in her the real queen did not have. Something human, something real. You could be different, David said softly. Not just a copy. If you have the courage to protect, to care, then maybe you are the queen they need. Her eyes widened at his words. For a moment, she looked almost afraid. You really believe that? She whispered. David nodded. I do, because you risked everything for me when you didn't have to. That makes you more than a shadow. The clone lowered her gaze, her lips trembling. If I believe that, then I must fight her. Not just for me, for all of them. But if I fight her, I may lose you. Before David could answer, the ground suddenly shook. A loud roar echoed through the ruins, and the night sky lit up with burning light. David rushed to the broken window and looked up. His stomach dropped. A massive warship hovered above the city, its engines glowing red. Searchlights blazed down, sweeping the streets like hungry eyes. The queen had found them. The clone grabbed David's arm and pulled him to his feet. We must move, she cried. They dashed through the ruins as the warship fired bolts of energy into the streets. Buildings exploded around them, sending fire and rubble into the sky. Screams filled the night as the poor people scattered, running in every direction. David's heart pounded as they sprinted through the chaos. Soldiers dropped from the ship, armored and armed, shouting commands. The clone led him through the crowd, shielding him with her body as blasts struck the ground around them. Her wrist device sparked with a glowing shield, deflecting some of the attacks, but it was weakening fast. They ducked into a crumbling tower, climbing the broken stairs as soldiers stormed in behind them. Dust and stone rained down with every step. David's lungs burned, his legs shook, but the clone never slowed. She pulled him higher, higher, until they reached the top where the roof had collapsed. From there, they could see the whole burning city beneath them. The clone turned, her face fierce, her chest rising and falling with every breath. We cannot keep running forever, she said. She will always find us, but I will not let her take you. David looked into her eyes, seeing the fear and fire battling inside her. He wanted to tell her to stop, to let him go, to save herself. But he couldn't, because deep down, he didn't want her to let him go. Suddenly, a spotlight from the warship locked onto them. A voice thundered from the sky, the queen's voice, sharp and commanding. Shadow, human, you cannot escape me. Surrender now, and I may show mercy. Resist, and you will burn with the rest of this city. The clone stood tall, her fists clenched. She shouted back into the sky, her voice breaking but strong. We will never surrender. You may be the queen, but you will never have his heart. That belongs to me. The crowd below gasped at her words. For the first time, the poor people of the city heard defiance against their ruler. Whispers spread through the streets, voices rising in surprise and awe. David felt the air change. Fear was still there, but something else was growing. Hope. The queen's warship roared louder, its weapons charging with light. David's stomach twisted as the clone grabbed his hand and pulled him close. Hold on, she whispered. No matter what happens, hold on. The next second, fire rained down from the sky. The tower shook, the stones cracked, and the world became a storm of dust and flame. David clung to the clone, his heart racing, his mind screaming. And through the chaos, one thought burned inside him. This was no longer just about survival. This was a battle between two women, one who claimed power and one who claimed love. And in that burning city, David knew the choice he made would change everything. The flames died down slowly, leaving smoke and ash curling through the broken city. David coughed, his chest tight from the dust, as he tried to push the rubble off his body. The clone was beside him, bruised but alive, her golden eyes glowing faintly, even in the darkness. She pulled him up, her hands trembling but strong. For a moment, David thought they had escaped the queen's wrath. But then heavy footsteps echoed through the ruins, and the sound of horns filled the air. The queen's soldiers marched into the broken streets, their weapons glowing with cold blue light. The warship above dimmed its searchlights, and a strange silence fell across the city. Then, from the heart of the smoke, the queen herself appeared. She walked with calm power, her crown gleaming, her armor untouched by the destruction. The soldiers bowed as she passed, but her eyes never left David and the clone. The clone pulled David behind her, standing tall even though she was shaking. But the queen's gaze pierced through them both like a blade. "Enough games," she said, her voice echoing through the ruins. "You will not run again. The human belongs to me." David felt the clone's grip tighten on his hand. She whispered quickly, her voice trembling. "Don't give in. She will promise you everything, but it is all lies." The queen stopped only a few feet away from them. She looked at David, ignoring the clone completely, as if she were just air. "Human," the queen said, her voice lower now, smoother, almost soft. "You have seen what I can do. One word from me, and entire cities rise or fall. If you give me what I want, you will share in my power. Your child will be born into a throne greater than any kingdom on earth. Imagine it, your bloodline ruling the stars." Her words slithered into David's mind like poison. He could almost see the vision she painted. Himself standing beside her, armies bowing, worlds whispering his name. A life of endless power, of legacy, of greatness. But then he felt the clone's hand, warm and trembling, clutching his. He looked at her and saw not a throne, but tears shining in her eyes. The queen's lips curved into a smile, sharp as a knife. "Choose wisely. If you deny me, she will be erased. Her body will burn, her name will vanish, her face will be forgotten. Even her ashes will not remain. She is a mistake, a shadow that never should have existed. Give me your child willingly, and she may live in silence. Refuse, and she dies here tonight." The clone stepped forward quickly, her voice rising in desperation. "No, don't listen to her. If you give in, you will be nothing but her slave. She doesn't care about you, only what you can give her. If I die as myself. But if you obey her, you will lose everything that makes you human." Her words cut through the heavy silence, trembling but strong. David's chest tightened. His mind spun with the weight of their voices pulling him in two directions. On one side, the queen offered power, safety, and survival. On the other, the clone offered nothing but love, sacrifice, and truth. The queen stepped closer, her eyes glowing like fire. "Do not be fooled by her pretty words. She is nothing but a reflection. You waste your pity on her. Stand with me, and I will make you more than human. Stand with her, and you will die forgotten in the dirt." David's throat felt dry. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His heart pounded, his body frozen. The clone looked at him, her tears finally spilling, but her voice did not break. "I don't want you to save me if it means losing yourself. Please, stay who you are, even if it costs me my life." Her plea shattered something inside him. He saw the truth in her eyes, the raw, painful truth. She loved him not because of what he could give her, not because of thrones or power, but simply because he was human, because he saw her as real. That was all she wanted, to be seen, to be loved, to exist. The queen's hand rose, glowing with deadly energy. Her patience was ending. "Choose now, human. Me or the shadow." The soldiers raised their weapons. The air grew hot, the ground trembling as her power gathered. David felt the world close in on him. For a moment, he thought he might break, that he might bow to survive. But then the clone's voice echoed again in his mind. "I am not a shadow. I choose you." Something inside David hardened. He clenched his fists, his voice trembling but loud. "No, I will not give you what you want." The queen froze, her eyes narrowing dangerously. David stepped closer to the clone, his chest rising and falling fast. "I am not your tool. I am not your slave. You may call her a shadow, but she has more heart than you ever will. If I give my child, it will not be to you. It will be to her." Gasps spread among the soldiers. The queen's face twisted with rage, her golden crown burning brighter. Her power flared, shaking the earth beneath them. She raised her hand higher, ready to strike. The clone screamed, rushing forward. In a heartbeat, she threw herself between David and the queen's attack. A blast of searing light struck her chest, throwing her to the ground. Dust and smoke filled the air. David cried out, dropping to his knees beside her. Her body trembled, her golden eyes flickering weakly, but she was alive. For now. The queen's voice roared across the ruins, shaking the city to its bones. "Then you have chosen death? Both of you." David held the clone in his arms, his heart pounding with fear and fury. He could see her blood, he could feel her warmth slipping away. But in her faint smile, in the weak strength of her hand clutching his, he saw something stronger than any crown. She had proven herself real, not by power, but by love. And as the queen raised her hand again to finish them, David knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of his defiance. Dust hung heavy in the air as David held the clone in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale, but her eyes still glowed faintly, refusing to close. Around them, the Queen's soldiers formed a circle, weapons raised, waiting for her command. The Queen stood tall above the ruins, her crown burning like fire, her anger filling the night. "You dare defy me?" she thundered, her voice shaking the ground. "A human, nothing but flesh and weakness, stands against his queen? You will be crushed, and your shadow will vanish with you." David felt his fear twisting inside him, but something stronger burned through it. He looked at the clone in his arms, the woman who had risked everything for him, and he felt his spine harden. Slowly, he stood, lifting her gently to her feet. She leaned against him, her body trembling, but she nodded as if to say she was ready. David turned his eyes to the Queen, and for the first time, he did not feel small before her. His voice came out loud, clear, carried by defiance. "I will never give you what you want. Not my child. Not my loyalty. Not my soul. You can destroy me, but you will never own me." The Queen's eyes blazed with fury. She raised her hand, energy crackling around her fingers, enough power to tear through stone and flesh alike. The soldiers tensed, waiting for her command. The clone pushed weakly away from David, standing in front of him with her arms wide, her voice breaking but firm. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The Queen's laugh was cold and cruel. "Then so be it. You will die first." She thrust her hand forward, releasing a wave of burning light. But at the last moment, David stepped out from behind the clone and spread his arms wide. The blast slammed into him, throwing him backward into the rubble. Pain shot through every nerve, fire ripping across his chest. But he did not fall silent. He forced himself up, coughing blood, and glared at the Queen. "This," he gasped, his voice hoarse but strong, "is what makes me human. I can choose. I can defy. You will never break me." For a brief second, silence fell. Even the soldiers froze, their eyes wide as they watched a fragile human stand against their mighty Queen. The clone rushed to David's side, tears spilling down her cheeks. She clutched him tightly, whispering, "Why? Why would you take the strike for me?" David smiled weakly through the blood on his lips. "Because you showed me what's real. You're not a shadow. You're more alive than she'll ever be. And if I die as myself, not her slave." The clone's tears dropped onto his chest, but in her eyes a fierce fire grew. She turned to face the Queen, her voice raw with emotion. "You call me a shadow, but look at me. I can love, I can fight, I can bleed. That makes me more real than you, more than a throne, more than a crown." The Queen's face twisted, her pride wounded, her power flaring brighter. She shouted to her soldiers, "Finish them both!" But something strange happened. The soldiers did not move. Their hands trembled on their weapons, their eyes darting between the Queen and her clone. Murmurs spread among them, whispers carried through the smoke. They had seen the human stand tall against death. They had seen the clone bleed and fight for love. And in their hearts, doubt began to rise. The Queen noticed the hesitation, her fury burning hotter. "Obey me," she roared. "I am your Queen." Still the soldiers hesitated. And in that moment, David forced himself up again, leaning on the clone for strength. His voice, though weak, carried across the ruins. "You see the truth, don't you? She rules with fear, but fear breaks. She calls her clone a shadow, but you've seen her fight, you've seen her love. Tell me, who is more real? The tyrant who takes, or the woman who sacrifices?" The whispers grew louder, spreading like fire through the soldiers. Some lowered their weapons, their faces troubled. The Queen's rage boiled over, her body trembling with fury. She screamed, "I am eternal! No human, no shadow can challenge me." The clone stepped forward, pulling David with her. Her voice was steady now, stronger than before. "You are wrong. Power does not make you eternal. Love does, and he chose me." The Queen's roar shook the skies as she gathered her full strength. Lightning and fire crackled around her body, her power tearing the ground apart. She raised her hands to unleash destruction, but before she could strike, the clone threw herself in front of David again. Her body glowed, her eyes blazing gold. She poured all her remaining strength into a shield of light. The Queen's blast hit, but the shield held, sparking with fire and pain. The clone screamed, but she did not fall. David held her from behind, his voice joining hers. "You're not a shadow, you're real, and together we're stronger than her." The shield flared brighter, blinding the soldiers, shaking the ruins. The queen staggered back, her own power rebounding against her. For the first time, her face showed fear. The shield cracked, sparks flying, and then it shattered, throwing both David and the clone to the ground. The queen fell to one knee, panting with rage. The soldiers stared in silence, no longer sure who to follow. David crawled to the clone, pulling her close. Her body was weak, but her eyes glowed with pride. She whispered faintly, "See? I told you. I am more than her shadow." David held her tight, his chest burning, his eyes locked on the queen. She had not been defeated yet, but she had been shaken. And in her fury, in her fear, David saw the truth. Her throne was not as strong as it seemed. The war was not over, but in that moment, the human and the clone had done the impossible. They had defied the queen, and the galaxy itself had witnessed it. Smoke still curled in the air, drifting over the broken ruins where the battle had shaken the city. David knelt on the cracked stones, holding the clone close to his chest. Her body was weak, her breathing shallow, but her eyes still glowed faintly with golden fire. Around them, the queen's soldiers stood frozen, uncertain, their weapons lowered. They had seen something no command could erase, a human defying death, and a clone proving herself more real than any throne. The queen rose slowly from where she had fallen, her crown tilted, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. Her power still crackled in the air, but her voice no longer carried the same unshakable authority. She looked at her soldiers, expecting them to move, but they did not. Their eyes darted between her and the clone. The silence cut deeper than any blade. "You dare?" The queen hissed, her voice breaking. "You dare hesitate before me?" She raised her hand, but the soldiers stayed still. Doubt had already taken root in their hearts. David stood, still holding the clone in one arm, and faced the queen. His body ached, his chest burned, but his voice came out clear. "You call her a shadow, but they've seen the truth. You command them with fear, but fear is not loyalty. Fear breaks. What she has, what we have, cannot be broken." The clone tried to speak, her voice weak but sharp. "I was made to be nothing, but I became more. I chose love. I chose life. And that makes me real, no matter what you say." The queen's lips curled into a snarl, but David saw something in her eyes. Fear. Not of him, not even of the clone, but of losing everything she had built. Her soldiers were watching, and in their eyes she saw the beginning of betrayal. "You think this changes anything?" she spat, though her voice wavered. "You are banished, both of you. Leave my empire, and never return. If you do, you will burn." The clone lifted her head, her eyes shining as tears slid down her face. "Banished?" she whispered, her voice carrying into the silence. "So you would rather cast us out than destroy us, because even you know the truth. You cannot erase me. Not anymore." The queen flinched, just for an instant, and that was enough. She turned sharply, ordering her soldiers back to formation. "Go! Leave them to the wilds. They are nothing now." Her voice cracked with fury as she stormed away, her cloak whipping through the air. The soldiers obeyed, though not with the same loyalty as before. Many glanced back at David and the clone, their faces troubled, uncertain. When the last soldier vanished into the smoke, silence returned. David sank to the ground beside the clone, his hands trembling as he held her. "It's over," he whispered, though his voice shook with doubt. "For now, it's over." The clone smiled faintly, her lips pale but soft. "She let us live because she fears what people saw. She fears me." Her fingers brushed his cheek weakly. "Thank you, David. You gave me more than I ever dreamed. You gave me a reason to exist." David pressed his forehead to hers, his voice breaking. "You're not a shadow. You're everything." They left the city that night, moving through the ruined lands under a sky filled with distant stars. The journey was hard, the clone weak from her wounds, but David carried her when she faltered. Together, they crossed deserts of red sand, forests filled with strange glowing beasts, and mountains that cut the sky. Every step pulled them further from the Queen's empire and closer to freedom. Months passed in hardship, but also in quiet moments of peace. David built shelters from stone and wood, hunted food, and cared for her wounds. The clone, though scarred, began to heal. She smiled more often, laughed softly at his clumsy human ways, and whispered her dreams under the stars. And then, one night, she took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever as she whispered, "David, I carry your child." He froze, his chest tightening, then pulled her close with tears in his eyes. "Ours," he whispered. "Not hers. ours. The months that followed were filled with both fear and hope. They lived hidden, away from the Queen's reach, but they knew her eyes still searched the galaxy. Yet as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, their bond grew stronger. The clone's steps slowed as her belly grew, but her heart was steady. David cared for her with patience and love, and she never stopped reminding him that he had given her meaning. At last, in a small shelter under the stars, the child was born. A baby with golden eyes and a heartbeat stronger than any they had ever heard. The clone held the child close, tears streaming down her face. "Look, David," she whispered. "Proof that I am real, proof that we are real." David wrapped his arms around them both, his heart swelling with pride. The baby's cry echoed into the night, small but powerful, as if announcing to the galaxy that something new had begun. Far away in her shining palace, the Queen stood before her mirror, her reflection staring back at her with cold eyes. Her spies had whispered the truth. Her clone had survived. The human still lived, and now a child had been born. For a long time, the Queen said nothing. Then slowly, a smile curved her lips. "So the game begins," she whispered. "The child is mine by blood. Sooner or later, they will return. And when they do, I will be waiting." Back in the wilds, David and the clone held their newborn close, unaware of the Queen's watching eyes. For now, they had only love, hope, and the fragile peace of family. And though the future was uncertain, one truth was clear. The child carried the strength of two worlds, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again.